All right, June 4th. I got a question today, and this video will be to answer that. It says a worker at the Chevron wanted to put his saving to open us specializing in ethnic food. Argentina, maybe. I also have a friend that wants to do a Thai food truck. Do you have any videos that give advice on starting up an ethnic cuisine restaurant? Parents, the parents of another friend has a restaurant in a mall, low margin. They're screwed. They can't give it away. Any thought on high margin restaurants? I recall you type. Okay, so let me start with the root of the restaurant business. Is a restaurant gets paid to provide value to customers, and that's true for any business actually. For example, Tesla, you pay $45,000 to $50,000 for a car. That's a lot better than everything else. So that's why you would buy it over something else, and that's how you get a lot of demand. All the same principles apply to restaurants. So the problem that I see with doing ethnic food is you don't have a competitive advantage over anybody except for the execution of the food that you do. Like because for the most part, let's say Chinese restaurants, you can walk into any Chinese restaurant and you can order honey walnut shrimp, and you don't even have to read the menu and you know it's there. So because it's such a common item, if you mess it up, then people are gonna complain because they compare you to somebody else. Whereas if you created a completely new category of dish that nobody had before, they can't compare you against it, and they can't compare you versus them. They can do it based on like, oh, does it taste good? That's the fundamental thing of it. But they can't compare you in terms of like, oh, I can get this at that other restaurant for $10 and you're selling it for $15. So I think that's the problem with ethnic food, is because it's very, very low on the creativity spectrum, because that's how my restaurants do well, is we sell creativity. And it's like economies of scale. It's like software. You can sell one or you can sell 100. Being more creative, being creative or being not creative, if you cook 100 dishes that is not creative and 100 dishes that are creative, you did the same amount of physical labor of cooking the dishes. But the creativity part takes knowledge on the front end and knowledge for everyone to execute. But then because of that, you can charge a premium for it. So I think that's the problem with ethnic food, is the perceived value of it is set at a certain price. And then at that point, you're just fighting with other ethnic restaurants, and then it's a race to the bottom, basically. Like if you produce the best Chinese food or whatever, you can if you produce the best Chinese food, you can probably charge a slight premium over the standard cost of Chinese restaurants, but you can't, let's say, double or triple or go so high that yeah, obviously it doesn't work. Whereas if you sold something really creative and it tasted good and people like, wow, I would happily pay this much for it again next time. It doesn't matter if your food cost is 5%, 10%, 30%, 50%. They're gonna come back and get it for the price that you had it, because they're happy with their experience. So, because that's the thing in fine dining too, is people scoop caviar and they serve Wagyu and they do this stuff that is very low labor and very low skill, and they charge a premium. And then where's the value derived in that dish? It's based on the ingredients being really expensive. So the flip side of that is, let's say, a Thai food truck. If Thai food in general is seen as cheap food. Like one of the main things is perception. Like, let's say Italian pasta versus Chinese noodles. They're both pasta dishes, and you could argue that certain Chinese noodles are harder to execute than Italian pasta. Like, I've made Italian pasta before, and I've watched videos of people like slapping the noodles and doing all that stuff and like using lye and all this complicated stuff. The knowledge and skill level to execute is at least it's very high. But a bowl of pasta sells, you can, like a high-end bowl of pasta, you can sell it for like 30 to 40 to $50. And what's the most expensive stir fry you can sell, even if it was like pulled noodles in a specialty place and whatever, maybe like $20. So when you do ethnic food in general has a perception of being on the lower end, which means you have less margin to play with, because that's essentially how restaurant how do you gauge a restaurant success is, one, do they make enough money to sustain themselves? Like, can they stay open? That's one level of success. The next level of success is, are they making enough to survive and pay the owner and pay all the staff and be sustainable, and then still make extra that they can start expanding their business? Because I think a lot of like small mom and pop ethnic restaurants, their main goal isn't to grow, it's just to feed their family, and that's fine. But when there's less room, when there's less margin, it's like when you get margin called, when things are bad, things are really bad. Whereas if you have a decent chunk of wiggle room on the top of every, like, let's say this is your break-even point, and then this restaurant profits this much, but then this one profits this much. COVID happens and this shrinks to this, and this guy, he still has a little profit, but then on this guy, he's losing money. So you really see which restaurants are financially unstable. It's like who gets pushed over the edge, and I think a lot of small mom and pop restaurants fall into that category. And as far as high margin restaurants, high margins are like a double-edged sword. If you don't provide enough value and you make a ton of margin, like let's say I have this dinner that would normally sell for $100. If I went and I sold it for $400, you might sell it to like 1/10 of how many people would have bought it at the $100 price point, but then you'll piss a lot of people off and they won't come back and they'll get all angry and stuff like that. So it's like a double-edged sword. Being high margin isn't, to a certain point, is a good thing, but it's more of finding that middle ground where, okay, I'll lose a little bit of customers, but at least I lost the crappy customers. Because that's one thing I noticed when I started going up in the price range. You price out a lot of the unsavory guests, the ones that complain a lot and they spent the least and they're camping, and yeah, so if you lose a customer, it's always best to lose the cheapest customers. Yeah, that's my thoughts on ethnic restaurants. If they really want to do it, they can do it. The only thing I would say is, if you're starting out and they've never done it before, keep costs as low as possible, then build up from there. Always expect the worst. Just run the restaurant, make sure the rent isn't that high to start. Run the restaurant bare bones, like you and your spouse or whoever, just get money coming in, and then from there, if it gets busy, then you can like invest in new equipment, you can hire more staff to accommodate more volume, that kind of stuff. Just start out slow, start out skinny and lean, and then work up from there in terms of margin. And yeah, that's how you expand. When I started my restaurant, it was me and one other person cooking, and then there was 2 servers. So 4 staff ran the whole restaurant, and I would say the 2 servers obviously didn't really do anything, but me and one other person, we ran basically the whole restaurant, and labor cost was not high. Now to run that restaurant, it takes like 2 to 2.5 times more people, but I don't have to be there. And that's the price you pay, because nobody is willing to work harder for your business than the owner. And that's the cost of getting me out of there, is probably $200,000 to $300,000 to basically replace myself with other people. Yeah.